in business, obviously goals are just so beat into your head ad nauseum. What are our goals this quarter? Did we hit our goals? Did we hit the revenue? Did we do, all these things? And it becomes dull to a certain extent, and you're not really sure in some aspects what the goal really means or what it should really be. And there's this concept called the systems over goals. Instead of thinking about the goal, the goal is important. That should be like the outcome objective, but the system of how you get there is more important, and it's more psychologically meaningful and effective. So I sat down with our team and we did that exercise. And so,
Brandon Rizzo, welcome to the Elite League Podcast. Guys,
sir.
Today we're going to talk about a man's journey in what we like to call the roller coaster of life.
Yeah.
You see, Brandon here has a ton of energy. You might identify with this. He's fired up. He's got big aspirations. He puts that energy towards anything he does.
Yes, sir.
And he's right now on the search for his own sense of greatness. So we're going to talk about that journey today.
Yeah.
Because, man, you've had a lot of things happen.
Yeah.
Restaurant industry, music industry, real estate industry now.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. Let's throw it back, Brandon. Where are you from?
So thanks for having me, by the way. Excited to do this. I know we talked about it for a while, and pumped to be here. So, I grew up in Ohio, small town outside of Cleveland called Twinsburg. So grew up a Cleveland kid, loved Cleveland sports teams. Grew up going to the Guardians, Indians games and Cavs games and stuff. And when I hit 18, moved to Chicago, went to school there. And so it's kind of like also home because I spent a lot of my formative years, college, post-college in Chicago as well. So Cleveland will always be like where I grew up, but Chicago is also kind of like a similar, in my heart.
Whoa.
Place
Chicago's cool, isn't it?
It is. Both are cold. So
cool and cold.
Cleveland, you got the snow belt, and then Chicago, you just got that bone chill, windy, nasty cold in the winter. So
yeah,
I
get it. Well, I love the small town story because I can't tell you how many times we had these prolific, iconic, significant guests on the show. When I say that, I'm tying it to what they do for work.
Yeah.
And they grew up in the middle of nowhere. Their parents were teachers. And you know what they did? They worked their freaking tail off. And they focused on one thing. What's that? I think it's just beautiful. It's beautiful. Success happens when priorities happen in the right order. So let's dive into that, shall we?
Yeah.
Your first endeavor in business. What were you doing? Where were you? How did it all start?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I grew up making music and always wanted to be a rock star. So music was like my identity it still is, but was the first 25 years of my life. That was like, I was defined by that. So even growing up, my brother and I, we taught ourselves how to play instruments, like how to produce. And that grew into this love and wanting to make our own music, go to school for it, move to the big city. So my brother, he went on to New York and did his thing. He was a couple years older than me. And then I grew up, obviously in Cleveland, then moved to Chicago and went to school at a liberal arts school called Columbia College in downtown. And, just put all my effort into, that music production, had a band, performed all over the Midwest and in the city and built a following there. And then I moved out to LA and continued to pursue music for a while as a solo artist. And along the way, I had friends who were big YouTube sketch comedy guys that I helped score some of their videos for. They did a feature that I was a composer on, and did some like commercial work and stuff here and there when I lived in Chicago. So that was kind of like the main thing that kind of drove me for so long. And self-produced and put out music on Apple Music and all that. And and then kind of as I got older and moved more into some of the other things that I wanted to do and grew a business career, I took a lot of that experience that I learned along the way as like a pseudo entrepreneur of sorts, like music artist, trying to make a buck doing what I love, and applied some of those life lessons to ultimately get to where I am now. And yeah, I'm also kind of consider myself like a polymath. So I'm interested in a lot of stuff. I love, all different kinds of topics, politics, science, business, history. When I was a kid, even with music, I would be in like choir class when we get done with our practices or whatever, and be like reading a business book, how to start your own business and stuff like that. So that always had this love of business and like interest in business. And my parents were both blue collar, worked their way up to provide a good life for me and my brother, and instilled these values of just like hard work and, kind of earning respect from your peers, so to speak. So every time I, was on a team or something, I'd want to get that buy-in and respect from, leading by example. So that kind of that mentality has always stuck with me, and I thank my parents for that for sure.
Man, yeah. And reflecting on some past guests, the parents,
Mm-hmm.
the parents have been huge role players for the way that people perceive life, the
Yeah.
way they attack every day.
Yeah.
Because the principles that they instill, that's amazing. What kind of principles do you think of when you think of your parents and what they impressed upon you?
Yeah, definitely hard work and loyalty, for sure. Um, Being honest and integrity was a big one.
Yeah.
I actually, it's funny. So a couple of years ago, when uh, a leader of mine had us do this thing called the user manual exercise, and it was like basically you create a user manual. If you think of like buy a new TV or something, and it comes with how do I use this product or whatever, and tells you how to set it up. So it was like that concept applied towards how can someone work with you on a team and get to know you and use the best you to help each other succeed. And so I actually sat down for one of the first times in my life and was, actually wrote out what I considered my, core principles.
How old were you?
This was like maybe like 5 years ago.
Let's take a quick pause here.
Yeah.
Everybody, what we heard Brandon just say is that he took time to write down his core values.
Yeah.
That's an incredibly powerful exercise.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, with the Elite League Mastermind group that we have, we did the mission, vision, value activity just last week. And the doors that it opened for some of the people on the call was miraculous.
Yeah.
I mean, they were lit up. So how did you feel once you finally wrote that down on paper?
Yeah, I had done it before in other team settings, but this time was the first of like I was focusing on myself and putting it into basically like a little mini slide deck to present to my team. And so I thought about what are the big buckets of my life that drive me, that are most important to me, and I basically landed on like three main values that have like subsets of each.
Yeah.
But the three main ones, and kind of get back to your original question about the
No, hit us with the main ones. This is good.
yeah. So the main ones are integrity, freedom, and mastery. So, and then off of those, there's a bunch of like sub offset ones. But integrity, because of that thing about my parents and the upbringing I had, like anytime I, had a show in music or a meeting in business or whatever, I'm always like the first person there, setting up, helping unload, getting going. And I always approached like people's time with that same level of respect I wanted to get back, So if I
lost art.
Yeah.
It's a lost art in a lot of cases.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean?
There were so many times our band would show up to like a gig, for instance, and we'd be there like 2 hours before the gig or before the call time. And the sound engineer that's supposed to be there first wasn't even there yet. And we're like, where do we unload? And just like that level of commitment and sacrifice to be respectful of the people that you're going to have to work with and their time, because time is one of the most valuable things we have, So that integrity of both time, but also word is my bond type mentality of, if I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to follow through on it. I'm not going to be one of these wafflers that says, oh yeah, for sure, I'll be at your party, or, oh yeah, for sure, I'll come to the podcast, Greg. And then an hour before, I'm like, oh, well, actually, man, I can't make it today. So that sort of like waffling, I just never wanted to be a person like that.
let's look at it. Let's say we're about to draw a diagram or a graph or whatever with the principle of integrity. Yeah. I think that we can keep score, our personal score of what we say to others and what we say to ourselves as far as action, what we're going to do, and then how many times we miss that mark. We can literally track it in a week. Hey, I'm going to do this. Or, hey, bro, I'll be there at this time, right? You can literally write all these things down, all these promises that you make to others and yourself. And then you can reflect it to what you actually did. Dude, there's your integrity score right there.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't that be something to actually track that for a whole week?
Yeah.
Dude.
It's crazy. I'm sure you could probably, whether you're at your job or whatever, there's probably things that you're already tracking where you could probably measure that out pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you say you're going to do something to somebody, right?
Yeah.
How do you follow up on it?
Yeah.
Do you follow up?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's awesome. That's good. So I'm going to encourage everybody that's listening right now to really take this into deep consideration because, again, it's kind of like a lost art. In America especially.
Everybody's like, what's in it for me?
Yeah, like, we should
with Instagram and everything.
We should do this sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, nah.
Yeah.
That's whack.
Yeah.
That's weak.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ain't about that.
Yeah, it's also like it takes, especially if you're starting where you don't necessarily have that credibility built up or that, level of layer of success or whatever. If you are trying to build something with people that you don't know or, even you and I, like we were strangers at once and, I just thought you were a really, one of those people cut from that same cloth of like just grinding and, doing these different things. And I wanted to be involved with that. Obviously, like that energy is contagious. And so even if things, you don't have this big, platform or whatever, you can build it by just committing to that value of integrity, by saying and doing and sticking to the things that you say you're going to do.
Principles again. Here we go. I'm going to rip these up today, okay? Because I think that the more we hear them, the more they stick with us, the more we repeat them. The success of our business and our lives is embedded in the most minute details, okay? So when we think about just saying something to somebody and actually following up, following through on that, how small is that?
Yeah, it's very, very
it's
small.
So small. Yeah. We got to pay attention to these things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So you got the core values.
Yep.
Yeah. And then what happened next? How did you feel?
So it was interesting to kind of like step outside and see it and be like, do I actually believe those still? And do I follow through on my commitment to those values and to kind of audit myself and take a step back and say, wow, this is powerful. Like this is what you believe to be the things that drive who you are. Are you really living that every day? And so ever since I had to do that, it actually, I obviously knew that those were things that were important to me, but now that I've committed that and I've sent that to people, it's so much more ingrained in my thought process. If I'm going into a new team or a new role or a new project, thinking first about, hey, remember that user manual, remember those values and principles.
Yeah, and as a culture, as a society, I think that there's some kind of taboo behind writing, journaling, especially if you're a man. You're like, I don't want to journal.
Yeah.
That's for sissies or whatever. No, I firmly believe that we are one with not only nature. Okay, you go on nature, you feel different, you feel better. Okay, you put your feet on the ground with no socks on, you ground and you recharge, whatever.
Yeah.
We're also one with the pen and the paper.
Mm-hmm.
When you write something out, your memory for that one piece increases by 70%. When you write your goals down, the likelihood of accomplishing them is 80%.
Yeah.
So the fact that you took time and wrote out your values is so powerful. And again, how small is it?
Yeah, it's very small. The other thing is these sort of exercises are important because my team right now, I just did this exercise with my team about systems over goals. Because obviously, like in business, obviously goals are just so beaten to your head ad nauseum. What are our goals this quarter? Did we hit our goals? Did we hit the revenue? Did we do all these things? And it gets almost kind of not meaningless, but you just kind of, it becomes dull to a certain extent, and you're not really sure in some aspects what the goal really means or what it should really be. And there's this concept called the systems over goals. And basically the exercise that my team was, instead of thinking about the goal, the goal is important. That should be like the outcome objective, but the system of how you get there is more important, and it's more psychologically meaningful and effective. Because when we have goals, and this was, there's a guy, Adam Alter, I think is his name, who I originally saw this concept. But essentially, you think about goals like on the Apple Watch, right? You set a step goal, you hit it, it dings, and then that's it. Okay, the next goal is 12,000 steps, and then you just kind of keep escalating the goal. Or if you have a goal to do $100,000 in a year in revenue and you're a small business, it's like, all right, we hit the 100,000, now let's do 200,000 or 500,000 or a million or whatever. And it just becomes a series of escalating goals. And the goals are important because they're a measure of, are you hitting where you want to be? But the system and how you achieve it is more important. So rather than saying, I want to write a book, sit down every day for an hour in the morning and write a page. And by the end of the year, you'll have a book. So that sort of concept is what he talks about. And there have been some books written on this and stuff.
Who's the author? What'd you say?
The guy that I heard it from is Adam Alter, but I don't know if he was the original kind of concept guy, but he has his own take on it. And that's kind of where I learned it from. But that same exercise, so I sat down with our team and we did that exercise. And so our rock goals for this quarter are tied to a system, and putting a system down on paper and then having an accountability component to it, and then 2 or 3 habits that are the system.
Oh,
and then you can,
habits.
And then you have a goal for it. Obviously, like the goal might be, want to hit this much in sales or whatever, but the system is what I'm having the team focus on and write down and think out. Because a lot of people do have their own systems already. They just never really thought of it as a mechanism to achieve and be fulfilled in a project.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like what I'm leading my team to do.
Yeah. Amateurs wing it. Professionals have systems and processes.
Yeah.
All right. Another powerful principle that we can apply to lots of things in our lives.
Yeah.
On my vision board this year, it says systematize everything. That's what it says. Right. So you wrote down your goals and then you came up with the plan behind it. Man, that's really powerful. What happened once you wrote everything down?
So with the user manual, so then it was kind of just talking about how to work together. With the systems exercise, obviously that's a more kind of pragmatic thing that you can use, that anybody can use. But from there, the user manual exercise, I just kind of saved that, and anytime I try to update it every once in a while just to make sure everything is kind of consistent. With times change, I change a little bit as things go by, but for the most part, a lot of those things stay the same. And so I'm able to share it now. I have this document. I can share it with my team, with somebody I'm going to start a project with, and I can be like, yo, look, here's something to learn a little bit about me and how to get the best out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, that's really good. So it begs the question for anybody on here. Well, actually, this is what I was going to touch upon earlier. Affirmations. Okay. You can stare yourself in the mirror and say that you're the best blank there is. Okay. You can say that over and over and over again. Right. But is anything going to happen? No, because there's no system behind it. Right. I could say I'm the best realtor in the world.
Yeah.
But until I actually start making phone calls, right. Yeah. And focusing on my craft, that ain't never going to happen. Okay. So affirmations. The quality of our lives in business is dictated by the quality of questions we ask ourselves every day. And you know what? I think that there's more to that. You're going to love this. You're going to love this. Once we ask the question, what's the commitment we're going to make to the answer? Oh, what's the commitment we're going to make? Listen closely to the answer, right? So, for example, I want to sell, I want to book out 100 leases this month for you, right? Yeah. What would the best property management company do this month? What would they do to do that?
As far as how would they achieve it?
Yeah, how would they achieve it? Give me one small answer.
Yeah, I think a process, a system for your leasing team to follow.
Okay, so the answer is develop the process for the leasing team to follow. Okay, so if you know that that's the answer, what kind of commitment can you make to that answer right now and then implement?
Yeah.
What can you do?
Yeah.
Serious. What is it?
Well,
this is fire.
following through on prospect leads, whether they book an appointment or not, for viewing.
So I commit. So then you can say this: I commit to following through with the prospect leads. Right? You write that down. That small little activity, dude, writing out the answer and writing out the commitment is freaking rocket.
Yeah, and maybe having a metric by which you're like, I'm going to follow up with this many times.
Yeah.
Or if they don't call back or they don't respond, what am I going to do next?
Yeah, exactly.
You're kind of taking it one step further to get, make sure that you follow through on it.
Let's just drive this home real quick and then we'll switch gears.
Yeah.
So we can apply the same principle. Ask the question, come up with the answer, then write the commitment down. Yeah? So let's say you want confidence. Write the question out. What would the most confident man in the world act like today? Who? And then you write out the answer and then commit to that. Like the most confident man in the world would act like he would have excellent posture.
Yeah.
And he'd be extremely present and whatever. Then I commit to having great posture today and being present today and Dude, that one microscopic thing. And you can apply that to the business too.
Yeah.
It's sick.
The other thing too, the last thing I'll say about it is not just focusing on it from a work perspective of what you want to achieve materially for success, how much you want to make, how much you want to do, whatever, but also having we call them grow daily habits of how you're going to work on yourself and how you're going to work on your spiritual, mental, physical well-being. And so having a system for that too, is very, very important. And I think especially with this day and age where you hear so much talk about wellness and all this stuff and how, how to combat that, having a system for your own grow daily spiritual, physical, mental well-being is arguably more important than even the work or the goals or whatever. For example, if I want to get closer to God, I need to set a system for, am I going to wake up every day and meditate and pray and spend 30 minutes or whatever? Am I going to study this text or this book? What is the system that's going to help you focus on those things that are more important, that transcend the material?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Right. Systematize everything. And then with that being said, it also brings up the topic of standards, because we can be our own worst enemy in the fact that, I've got this system to get closer to God, right? I'm going to pray every night or whatever you come up with. Yeah. And then you miss it one night and then you might miss it another night. And then what you're going to do is say, this isn't working. Forget about it. And
it was pointless.
Started.
Yeah.
So then it's the standard. What is the standard for yourself? If I'm going to work out 7 days a week, well, you're not going to hit a 2.5 hour workout every single week. That might not be realistic. Right. So at a minimum, what are you willing to do? If I can't hit that 2.5 hour workout, maybe you'll bang out 150 push-ups in your apartment, in your house, right? Standards. If you can't pray for an hour, maybe minimum standard, pray for 5 minutes, because it's all about protecting your momentum.
Yeah. Achievable yet ambitious.
Boom.
There you go.
Dude, this is freaking sick.
Yeah.
Yo, I'm getting fired up, baby. So, bringing it back.
Yeah.
Music. You're in LA at the time.
Yep.
Yeah. And you're doing your solo career. Talk about the ebbs and flows of success, triumph, travesty, everything in between. Talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I think for me, pursuing it became a bit of a rat race, because it's when I was in Chicago, I had a band and I had a group of guys I could lean on for support and trust to do this thing. Or, my guitarist who I started the band with, his name's Nick, shout out Nick. Him and I would kind of run most of the day-to-day operational components of the band. And then, whether it was marketing or booking, following up with our bookings and stuff. So there was a delineation of responsibilities and a kind of a support with one another.
Yeah.
Once you go on your own, you're the only person to do that. And it can get you can burn out easily from it. And you see even celebrities and people who've reached the highest of highs, pinnacle of whatever it is, whether it's athletics, music, whatever. And you see even those folks get to a point where they hit their breaking point. They snap, they lose it, And so I think for me, kind of transitioning, going to a place I didn't have a network, kind of starting over, not having my guys. That was really eye-opening. It was definitely hard for me mentally and spiritually and physically. And I basically got to a point where I had to look at myself and say, what do you want out of this? What is it that you value? What's going to be meaningful going forward? Because I did have a lot of other interests, like we talked about. Like I grew up just interested in a lot of things, and so even if I hit the highest highs in music, there's still going to be those other things I want to get to someday. And so I think we're not in society, we're pushed this message of you have to, start your own business or do this or do that, and like, go after your dreams and chase those dreams, and but there's no kind of reflection on what happens when you are not getting there or not getting, fulfillment out of it anymore. What do you do? And so for me, I had to sit down and be real honest with myself. My whole identity was tied to this music pursuit. And I also had these other things I was interested in and wanted to get to someday. And so I had to really just be honest, like, you know, and pivot and kind of start branching out into those other things. And the other thing was music was always something that fulfilled me at my core and spiritually, and was my outlet. Growing up and doing things, writing, like you said, journaling or whatever. I used to write poetry, or I used to write song lyrics when I was a kid growing up, and eventually turned those into songs. But that was my outlet, and got in music because it was the thing I loved to do. Like making music felt good. And at a certain point when it just became about doing it for some sort of outcome, it lost that value or that meaning, Yeah. And I needed to get back to that. In order, if I was ever going to have success in it again, I needed to get back to like what it is that made me do music in the first place.
Wow.
And so I think forcing myself to make a pivot and go towards these business goals I had for myself that I wanted to do, it allowed me to kind of open that heart space.
Well, real quick, what forced you to pivot to the business side of things?
So at the time, I just kind of wasn't getting anywhere with music, and I kind of hit a point where I was like, I gotta do something else to make money, to bring money in.
Money.
Yeah. Because let's be honest, you gotta pay the bills, right?
Oh yeah.
So there was that. There was also this thing of like, do I want to continue down this path of just kind of burning myself out to, maybe it will get there someday, but right now I've been doing it this long. It's not getting there. Maybe I need to change things up and see if I get a different perspective on this, And so, for better or for worse, criticize it if you want, judge it if you want. Maybe I gave up on my dreams too soon. Maybe that's a fair, critique of that perspective. But for me, I kind of did what was right for me in the moment, and I changed gears and started focusing on this other thing I wanted to do. And that's led me to all these other experiences that I look back now. I think here's a good way of looking at it. I think I used to get so hung up in the moment, not appreciating what I had already achieved or was achieving with the music stuff. And I was always only thinking about rock star, stadiums, thousands and thousands of people. I was always thinking like that was what the measure of success was.
Yeah.
But along the way of doing what I was doing, I wasn't hitting that, but I was like playing the House of Blues, opening up for major acts.
Whoa.
Had all these fun experiences with my buddies, whether it was when we went on the road and did our first like shows in other states, and there were all these experiences that once I kind of stepped out over here and looked at it, now I look back and I'm like, man, I actually did a lot of cool shit.
Yeah.
And I achieved a lot of shit. Yeah, maybe it wasn't multi-platinum $1 million status, but it was still meaningful, and it was still what it was, and cherish that and look back at that as like, that's pretty awesome.
You were happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I think that when we tie our emotions to outcomes, we are destined for failure. And even, I've heard this countless times, once you get to the quote unquote top, it's never what you expect.
Never enough either.
It's never enough. And then once you're there, you go, well, it's going to feel good, right? You win the Super Bowl. It's going to feel good for a week. And then you get right back to work.
Yeah, and you got to win another Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, Tom Brady won 7.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I won 1. He won 7. Oh, got to win 7 now.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that kind of never enough.
Right. So what I beg this. I asked this question, I think, 2 podcasts ago about what is the whole meaning behind it? What is the gold, the real gold? Okay, because some might say, oh, winning the Super Bowl 7 times is gold.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, no, it's not. What is the everlasting goodness that comes from this type of success? Or even if it's not the success like that, just doing what you're called to do, right? Doing what fulfills you, what drives you. I am going to say that it's character, because no one can take that from you.
Yeah.
No one can take your integrity. No one can take your character, right? When you bring a smile to the table, your energy, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what we have to focus on.
You know what, too? I think it's the Western society we live in is so tied to this like idea of material success.
Yeah.
And the ancients and humans for thousands and thousands of years, there were different, I would say, role models in the culture or in society of what was valued as a high status or high value,
Really?
Person, right? You think about like the elders of a tribe or whatever were looked to as like the wise ones, the ones that you went to for advice or whatever.
Yeah.
And some of them weren't the chief of the tribe or the, highest producing warrior or best warrior in the clan. There were a lot that they had other functions in the society or in the culture, and they were still looked at as role models and wise and people to go to. And I think we so commonly elevate in our society these role models of a certain type or archetype and place so much value in them and not in value of, the guy who works as a firefighter and has 3 kids and shows up for his family and is an amazing person in the community, has helped save lives, has done all these things, right? Yeah. But he's not some glamorous, business guy that makes $1 billion or, some rock star or entertainer that like is vain and famous, It's that sort of, I think, elevation of more role models in our society are focusing on showing people that they can be this. You don't have to be the diamond in the sand or the diamond in the rough that's, this magical thing that is so unachievable. People can be who they are. Like you said, be their most authentic self and find their calling. And then that's what gives your life meaning. And you do that, whether it's materially successful or not, might not matter. It's like, what's your character?
Yeah. So it makes me wonder, what would we be like as a society if we didn't have money? If there was no currency. I think we're also designed to have this kind of pyramid thought process on a lot of things, right? Like whenever we talk about, oh, that guy's got 3 jets, and we always go, wow, imagine that. Or this person has went to all 80, whatever, 100, I don't know, countries. Whoa. Right? Like there's always going to be the best, the top, and we're always going to be drawn to that. And it's going to be, exciting to spectate and stuff.
Yeah.
What if we took money off the table, though? What would we be drawn to?
And what would we place as a value of the metric for success?
Right, dude.
Right.
Whoa. So what is that then?
Your relationships, right?
Yeah.
Your relationships, how many people you help, how many, lives you touch.
How much you can live in an abundantly loving mindset or framework, wherever the word is. Yeah. Right? Because that's what's going to attract people to you.
Yeah.
That's what's going to make you more friends. It's going to make a bit better life.
Yeah.
That energy, that happiness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Am I onto something here?
Yeah. And kind of pivot into what we do, like with real estate, right? I think there's kind of different perceptions of what real estate is, and people in real estate a lot of times might not be so good. It takes a bad rap sometimes as greedy, agents out there just, trying to sell my house and make a buck. But what drew me to real estate is I'm a learner. I pride myself on learning about a lot of things and learning and going deep into those topics and really researching.
You picked the right industry.
And that's what I'm saying. So it's like, that was one of the things that drew me to it, because you constantly have to educate yourself. You got to get CEUs, but you also got to, be able to help your clients.
Yeah.
And then the community service oriented nature of what it means to be in real estate. I truly do feel that in this job, you have a significant potential to make your community better, but it's not really looked at that way. And I spend a lot of time talking to clients or investors or whatever, and I've made it a point for myself to give those people support or advice or connect them with people for free, because it helps them achieve what they're trying to do. And if you can take that help and giving mentality first, it rises the whole tide, that rising tide kind of effect.
Big time.
And so whether I convert that client to work with me or not, it's important. But if I'm really living the values of the code of ethics, right? Put the client over your own needs first. If I have the opportunity to hold some information back and convert them into a client, or give them that information and see if I get the signature, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Because I might not be the best person to help them.
Right.
But I gave them the information to make the best decision, and then they went on to be successful. And so that's what really drew me to real estate, is like, you can have that approach. Of course, you can be the agent that just wants to make money for himself,
Do whatever it takes.
Yeah. But you also have the opportunity to lift others up, build your community, make it a better place. It's the approach. Which one you want to do.
Yeah, and people can sense that stuff. Sure, you might be successful in whatever regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have to go to bed with yourself every night.
Yeah.
And that ain't where it's at.
Yeah.
If you're living like that.
Yeah.
No. You're talking about this, and just last night, my friend connected me with her friend who has 2 properties for sale. And my friend was going, yeah, what's going on? And these properties aren't selling, and I don't know if the realtor's doing their job and all that stuff. And then I looked over to the girl that has the 2 properties for sale, and I said, you know something? We're just in a really, really hard market. I'm sure your realtor is actually doing a bang-up job for you and working his tail off. If you ever get a sense that he's not doing that, then of course I'm happy to chat.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, just know that you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
I could have been like, oh yeah, your realtor's doing not putting out. I've heard that song. I could have spun it in so many ways.
Yeah.
But you got to speak transparently, right? That's a huge word.
Mm-hmm.
Transparent. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's again kind of like a lost art.
Yeah.
Because we're pressured.
Mm-hmm.
The social media, the success, whatever. That ain't where it's. That ain't character.
Yeah.
That ain't character. So I want to pat myself on the back for that one.
I like that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bro.
It's assuming a positive intent out of that agent, right? Mm-hmm. You're not just stealing the business or talking crap about them. They probably are working hard. Mm-hmm. Same thing. I have a lot of these same conversations with clients that come from another company, and they're like, my property manager isn't doing it. They don't get back to me. They messed up this maintenance bill or whatever. And that is a common error.
Happens all the time.
It happens all the time. And it is a very challenging business to be on the other side of that. And so, a lot of times I'll take the steel man approach of the competitor and be like, okay, so tell me a little bit more about this situation. Why did it go that way? And the context is a little grayer than just what the person said, might be some other things at play there. And so you have to assume that positive intent and, remember that you might have to do business with that competitor someday. or help them transfer something over. You got to get documents, whatever it is, And so you need to be always thinking of it. How can I create good relationships with people, regardless of what side of the transaction or customer dynamic they're
And
on?
it starts with self.
Yeah.
Lynn Ann Weaver, a high performance coach, was on here, and she was talking about this. You got to have a good relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
Right? You got to have that self integrity. You got to be truthful, honest with yourself, because if you're not, then that stuff is going to leak into your business.
Yeah.
And then you're destined for failure.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
So take notes, kids. Be honest with yourself.
For sure.
So you transition in the business space. Okay, you get out of the music scene to an extent. Where are you at this point?
So some friends that I became real close with at the time when I was living in LA, they had this crazy concept idea for a restaurant. It was a fast casual kiosk. Restaurant was called PBJ LA. Shout out to Brad, Jimmy, and Pave. So Brad and I were really close friends from working together at a previous job, and he asked me to come, help be a thought partner, business partner, general manager to help them launch it.
What an honor.
And it was a big honor. They had a restaurateur attached to it that was going to bring in a lot of press and attract all this, attention to the opening. And we were opening in Grand Central Market, which is a historic food hall in downtown LA. It's launched Egg Slut and countless other really popular Instagrammable kiosk type restaurants. And so it was a perfect fit. The Grand Central Market, a little history about it. In 1917, it opened, and the first vendor was a peanut butter maker or a peanut vendor.
Oh.
And so the market loved our concept because the concept of our restaurant was nut butters and jams that are like artisanal, created by chefs. And they're fruit and nut pairings from different cuisines.
Yeah.
And then we would take the American, pastime of PB&Js and create like PB&J style sandwiches out of those like fruit and nut pairings and different like artisanal nut butters and jams.
Whoa.
And then we would pair them with like vegan almond milks that were like made at the restaurant. So,
oh, nice, dude.
So it was a cool like little foodie concept thing. And so the market really loved the idea because it was the 100-year anniversary when we opened in 2017, and they wanted to kind of also tie it to the history of the market, and that being the first vendor. So it was kind of like a really cool full circle moment. Yeah. But yeah, so I helped them launch that, and it was wild. I mean,
lines out the door,
viral videos, on all the social media. You had, Food and Wine, Taste Made, all these big publications come doing little pieces on us. There was always something going on, the number one chef in the world at one point came as just, stopped by for lunch one day, and we didn't even know he was in line. He posted on it was, Daniel Hom, I think is his name. But he posted on Instagram with a business partner, and we were like, we didn't even know the guy was there. That's awesome. So there was like these really cool moments that happened. But for me, it definitely taught me a lot about being a entrepreneur, starting a business, especially a cutthroat business like food in one of the most cutthroat food cities you could possibly imagine. And yeah, just so many experiences from that really taught me resilience and how to work through adversity in the business sense, and just so many life lessons.
Something led to the exit, because you're not doing that. Yeah, clearly you're in Austin, Texas, and what led to you departing that?
Yeah, I think the guys were, looking to change things up a little bit. I got an opportunity to go work for another company, and it was right, for my time in my life, and right for them to kind of make some changes. And so stepped out of that, went to do the role I was recruited for, and still help them kind of from afar, support them however I, could. and the restaurant succeeded for a while, like all through the pandemic, even through the pandemic. So they partnered up with a nonprofit that would you could basically, I remember everything was shut down, right? And even first responders, they couldn't get some of the stuff they needed or food or whatever. And so you could make a donation order through this nonprofit, and then they partnered with a bunch of restaurants in Los Angeles.
Amazing.
And then they would deliver that order to like first responders and nurses and hospitals and stuff. So it was a really cool concept because it gave people in the front lines, a reprieve, some snacks, some food, but it also helped keep those restaurants afloat during a time where they couldn't be open.
Wow.
So that really helped sustain them too. And then I think they closed the original kiosk down maybe a year or two ago, and are now kind of thinking about what they want to do with it in the future. But yeah, it was just a fun thing to do.
So how did you choose your next step in life?
Yeah.
After that?
So I got recruited to work for WeWork and went on to do that. And that was kind of my entrance into the real estate space. And here we are, 7 years later.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. We're going to tie this up eloquently here because we're painting a picture. I'm telling a nice story. You have, you bring a bright energy into the world, right? There's no doubt about it. You're driven, you are heartfelt, and, you're aware of a lot of things, right? You've got the growth mindset, right? You're like part of the 20%. So what are you working on? What is most important to you as far as what you are working on that drives fulfillment for you, that brings the excitement?
Yeah.
It could be anything. What is that?
So I think for so long I was working for me, like what I wanted in terms of success or material or whatever the case may be. And so I think the mentality I have tried to start to develop and am certainly doing today is how can I start to help those around me?
Yeah.
And it starts with like a client-focused business like real estate where you are forced to work for others and the community around you. And so everything I do now is with that in mind. Of course, I want to achieve things for myself and hit certain levels, but I think the mentality has shifted to how can I make the world around me a better place?
Yeah, when you talk about process, the process goes, as Zig Ziglar would said.
Yeah.
You've got to help as many people as you can get what they want for you to eventually get what you want. So you're asking the right questions, right? How can I help as many people? And this is the avenue that you've chosen to help these people.
Yeah.
And then all the results, the outcome, whatever, all that stuff, that's going to come.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that's huge.
It makes it simpler too to focus on this one kind of guiding light. And that's the system, and focus on that. And all the other things will fall into place. But the guiding light that is the thing I'm focused on, it also makes me feel good.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely going to be people that are not going to be happy with me. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to make mistakes. I already have in my life. And it's how you respond to that. What you take, what you learn from that experience and apply it to the next time so you don't do that again.
Yeah.
But that guiding light, whatever's driving you, whatever you're focused on is going to become your reality. So do you want what you're focused on to be something that's hollow or something that is filled with abundance? And I think helping others first and lifting up those around you is filled with light, and it can only be good.
Good.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Buzzword. Key term.
Yeah.
Goodness. So I want to ask the audience a question to think about right now. You might already have a firm answer, right? Can't hurt to ask it again. How are we bringing the goodness into our environment? How are we doing that? And then also, remember how we can be our own worst enemies, right? We don't need to have the hugest environment to do that.
Yeah.
We don't need to have a massive freaking kingdom, right? Start small. Impact those that are around you first.
Yeah.
Right? Really feel that.
Yeah.
Because you want to have a good, nourishing, enriching life. It's all right in front of you.
Yeah.
Literally right in front of you. So
Yeah.
let's have that awareness.
That's what you said there about, having a small circle around you and just focusing on that. If you think about it, if you only touch, 5 people in your life, but the mark that you make on those 5 people is so inspiring and important that then they go out and do something in honor of that, the actual effect that you had has a potential that is greater than if you would have had 100 people that maybe you didn't make that much of an impact on. So the smallest of circles or smallest of reach could also have a huge impact. And if you just focus on how can I make that immediate impact on those and make it as meaningful as possible, that can ultimately bring that abundance.
Yeah. I'd rather have 100% impact for 2 people than 20% impact on 100 people.
100%. Yeah.
Wow. Woo! Oh my gosh, bro. This is freaking sick.
Heck yeah, dude.
This is a buzzing conversation. Brennan, this is called the Elite League Podcast. And what the term elite means to us is people that are bringing the light into the dark. It's not a political word, elite, okay, because I know there's a lot of negative stuff about that. It has nothing to do with that. Okay, and you definitely meet that mold. Okay, you come into the room, you're like, how can I inspire these people? How can I help as many people as I possibly can?
Yeah.
You're making a difference. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
From me to you, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for
and I'm
what
sure.
you do.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I'm just acting out my purpose over here. You know what I'm saying? How do people get a hold of you?
So I'm on Instagram at Rizzo Feels. If you want to connect with me there. Also on LinkedIn, Brandon Rizzo. And I work with the great folks at Evernest Property Management. So if you're an investor, if you are a homeowner, if you're a real estate agent, broker, lender, whatever in the real estate industry, love to consult with you, talk how we can help you and, lift you up, help your circle grow for sure. Run.
Folks, you're here to hear first. Brandon Rizzo, again, thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks, sir.
Appreciate you big time. Make sure to hit that thumbs up. Smash that subscribe button. Please, it really means a lot to us. And give us a 5-star review. If you got any golden nuggets from today, that's always my goal, to sow some seeds. So thank you again for listening. Greg Carlson, Elite League Podcast. Till next time, everybody, stay fired up.
Yes.
Cheers.